Alright, today we're going to change a clutch in a 2000 Jeep Wrangler. I also pulled the transfer case. You don't have to do that. I just wanted to. And I've never done it before, and I've left everything that surprised me in the video so that it won't surprise you. And I hope this helps you out. Alright, I figure we'll go over everything I'm going to install that's new before I start getting rid of it so you can see everything we're going to put in. All this stuff that's on here came with the Luck clutch kit. It's got the Throwout bearing and carrier, all brand new. That thing shows you how much I know. I don't even know what that's called off the top of my head. The clutch, a pilot bearing and clutch tool for putting the pilot bearing in. So that's real handy. It just comes with that. And then you got the new pilot bearing, and it comes with its own little tube of grease for the spine, which is cool because I bought a tub not knowing that it came with that. And also I got a new pivot ball that I bought from a Dodge dealership, and this spring I bought that new that holds the release fork onto the pivot ball. And mine that's in my bell housing, it still looks really good. It does have a plastic point, and it actually wore the paint off the release fork where it pivots on here. And I don't know if the STEALERSHIP replaced this 5 months ago or not, so I don't really know how fast they wear, because I don't know if the one that's in mine has 100,000 miles on it or if it's brand new. So I'm replacing it anyway. $10 and it's a lot of work to get to it. This is $5 and it's a lot of work to get to it. So definitely would get at least this for $5 if you're going to do all this work. Alright, this is the idea I kind of got from Water Dog to show everybody where everything is while the transmission's out, so that you guys know what you're looking for, because it's real hard to see when you're in there. So everything you need to remove down here, there's two large, I used 18 millimeter. It fits tight and fits like a glove with 18 millimeter. 3/4 inch fits on there, but it's a little sloppy compared to 18 millimeter. So there's one here and one here on this side. It's a nut and bolt. The exhaust is in the way of getting to this one, so I used an adjustable wrench for the nut on both sides so that there was room to get the wrench in there, but you can fit your ratchet on this side. And then these are 5/8, I believe. Left my sockets around so I don't mess this up telling you guys. Yeah, 5/8. There's one on each side. This one has a little clip on it that holds the slave cylinder for the clutch cables. So a 5/8 here and a 5/8 on the other side, which is just above the starter. The starter is held on and also has to be removed to disconnect the transmission by another 5/8 right here. And this one comes in through the back to the back of the starter, and it is a 9/16. Then you have these three small bolts. They are 1/2 inch. There's one here, one here, and one here. These just hold the camshaft position sensor on, so you don't really have to worry about them to pull it, but you do have to pull the camshaft position sensor. That's where they're located, and they're a smaller size, I'm not sure. This is the E12 external Torx bolt that I have. It's in the top. This is the bolt that the STEALERSHIP stole, and I'm guessing from what Water Dog told me, that's another E12 external Torx bolt. So when my wife gets home, before I go to put this back, I'm going to go to the dealership, see if they have one of these. Not the one that stole it, because I want to hit him with a bat, but I'm going to go to a Dodge dealership and see if I can get one. And if not, I'm going to go to Ace Hardware and buy a bolt that'll fit and put it back. So I'm going to put this in front of the video of taking the transmission out. So just a quick walkthrough of the sizes you need and where everything is located at. I'm just going to record this now while I got it, since I will be returning this after I'm done with it. but this is a pilot bearing puller and a slide hammer that I borrowed for free from O'Reilly Auto Parts stores. So that's nice to know you can get this for free. They sell it at Harbor Freight. It's like $75, $80, something like that. But you borrow it for free and barely ever use it, so you might as well. That's a good deal. I like that. And then the other abnormal tool I bought is the external Torx. All you need is the E12 size. So if you just want to buy one, it's E12. But those are the only abnormal tools you need. Everything else I already had and was very common. So hope that helps. Other stuff I'm going to be using that you might want to get yourself some before you start is some blue Loctite. And if you're interested in going through much brake cleaner as I did to get your inside of your bell housing this clean, as well as making sure there's no oil on the flywheel, I went through almost 3 cans, just under 3 cans, but I went overboard. You don't even have to clean that, and that's where most of it went, is cleaning that bell housing out. If you just want to do your flywheel, you'll need less than a can. Alright, first thing I did was jack up the vehicle. I jacked up the rear end higher than the front end a slight bit to keep everything more level when the transmission lowers a little bit when we go to take it out. I got that advice from Water Dog on the Wrangler forum. It was great advice. First thing I'm going to do after that is spray this grommet down that holds the exhaust to the transmission with some silicone spray to make it easier to remove. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do is remove these 4 5/16 bolts that hold the driveshaft U-joint. I marked it with paint marker, so when we put it back, we can put it back the same way it came off. It says to do so in the FSM. And when you take it off, be careful that your caps don't fall off the U-joint and your needle bearings can come spilling out and you'll have a mess and probably need a new U-joint. On the rear, if yours has never been taken off before, you'll have a metal band like this where I have a zip tie. I'm just going to pull my zip tie off with needle nose pliers, and when I replace it, I will put the same back on it. And once we get the back part off, this will just slide out and come right off. The front, I'm only going to unhook the front. I'm going to leave it connected to the transmission, but I think it'll be a lot easier to get to the front once I have the engine supported if I do it now and not have that in the way. Alright, I got the 4 bolts out here and it's all off, so I'm going to show you how easy this slips off once you do that. Push it in towards it, down, and then out. Make sure your caps don't fall off. I'm going to wrap them with tape after I get out from under here. And I'm going to put my bolts and little retainers back in here, just hand tight so they don't get lost track of. Alright, I got the engine shored up, and the service manual says use an adjustable jack stand and a block of wood. I used stuff I had around the house, cinder blocks, some composite shims, and pieces of wood, and they're up a lot closer to it than it looks in this thing due to the shadows, so make sure you get as close as possible to it. I think I got even closer than I could if I had an adjustable jack stand. This should support the weight of the engine from hanging down too far when we take the transfer case skid plate off. So it's not intended to hold the whole weight of the vehicle. Never try to jack your vehicle up by the oil pan. As you can see, this is a fairly new one because I was stupid and tried to jack my vehicle up by the oil pan before and smashed it in. And learned how to put a new oil pan on. So hopefully this works out, my new oil pan don't get smashed. Our next step is to remove the clutch slave cylinder. Here's the transmission. And here, let me get this light on. This is the slave cylinder right here. Remove it by taking out a 1/2 inch size nut right here and one right around the back here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that out. Alright, that came out really easy. I did use a deep well 1/2 inch socket because the bolts were really long and got in the way of my regular socket. A wrench would work fine too. Now they're just coming out finger tight. It's pretty easy. And as the nut started to come off, it started to come out on its own. It's not stuck in there or anything. But here is our slave cylinder. Just removed with 2 1/2 inch nuts, which I'm going to stick back on the bolts so I don't lose them. I don't like how the slave cylinder was just kind of dangling in the way of the transmission, so I took a gear tie and tied it up to the brake lines just to keep it up out of the way. So I don't know, you could do that if you want. Alright, next step is to take the transfer case skid plate off. It has 6 bolts that are 3/4 inches. Mine has spacers on it because I have a lift kit with a transfer case lowering kit, so if yours is stock you won't have those in there, but it just makes for longer bolts. And I put my floor jack under my transmission. It's an extra step that's not in the service manual, but some people on the Jeep forum recommended doing it to help support this until I get my transmission jack under it. Even though I got that, it'll be less pressure on my oil pan, that's for damn sure. So I'm going to leave that there until I get the skid plate off and then my transmission jack under the transmission. Alright, I ran into my first little surprise. I first thought these 6 bolts on each side are what hold the skid plate on, and I thought that was the only thing. But there's also these 4 nuts right here where it attaches to the transmission. That's why I'm trying to let you guys know everything that surprises me, because I've never done this before, but I know it's going to be fairly simple if you follow it step by step, and I want you to be confident that you can do it yourself so you don't get ripped off by the STEALERSHIP like I was forced to do. Forced to do 4 or 5 months ago when I paid to have this same thing done. Cost me about $800. So I'm going to finish taking these off with a 13mm socket. First metric nuts that I've found along the way so far. And then I'm going to take these the rest of the way out. They're just hand tight, holding it in place so I can take these out. Alright, I got those 4 nuts off, and as you can see the skid plate is all the way down to the ground on that side. The transmission is no longer attached to it, and it's being held up by my jack and soon to be by my transmission jack. Then I'll remove this jack. The service manual says all you need is the oil pan supported, but that is a lot of weight I don't want on my oil pan, so I agree with the guys on the forum to use this extra jack. So let's finish pulling these bolts out. Alright, skid plate's all the way off. Got my paint marker out again and marked the location so we can put it back in the same spot. And for this job, to pull the transmission, the service manual says to have it in 1st or 3rd gear. I have it in 1st, and that's going to make these 5/8 bolts real hard to get to on the other side. So I went ahead and threw the transfer case into neutral because it doesn't say anything about what to have that in, and I can just flip my drive shaft and get to those other bolts real easy. So glad I thought of that before I tried getting to the other side. I'm going to disconnect the electrical connections now. This is the back of the transfer case. This goes to an oxygen sensor that's on the exhaust right next to it. It slides out of its holder. I broke it and see that it slid out, so I'll probably zip tie it when I put it back to make sure it don't go anywhere. Also, the way you remove it, unconnect it, there was a little tab right here. You lift up on it and then this pulls out. When I lifted up on mine, my Jeep's a 2000, I've had it since it was new, and it's 13, 14 years old now, because I bought it in 99. But this shit was real brittle and it just snapped off, so be careful when you lift up on it. Once you lift up on it, you can just pull this connector apart, and it had slid off the thing. Now the exhaust isn't attached to the connector anymore. I don't know where it goes from there, but it might be hooked to the transmission. It's hard to video and use two hands. Alright, so this one, you push in on this little red connector, little red plastic thing I should say. Once that's in, this one slipped right off fairly easily. Alright, found a better way to get these things like this out of their holes, and that's what was on the other side that I thought was a zip tie, only it was clear. I think it was added by the STEALERSHIP because there was a vacant black one that wasn't even used about 4 inches away from it. But you just take your needle nose pliers and squeeze below it and lift it right out of the hole. Instead of trying to use the little screwdriver, it worked a lot easier. And while I had my needle nose pliers out, I squeezed the little hose clamp on my vent tube and pulled that off the transfer case. So now all my wires that I found and my breather tube are disconnected. Right, so there's another wire that I just found out from the factory service manual. It's the crankshaft position sensor or speed sensor. It calls it both things. It says it must be removed, and obviously it's bolted to the transmission. So this is where we took our slave cylinder out earlier, and I also just unhooked it from this. It's really flexible, so you can just pull it out of there, and this is where I tied it up to. So that's where our slave cylinder was, and here's the crankshaft position sensor that's got 2 bolts holding it on. I just checked them. Let me look and see what size it is for you. It's a 7/16 size bolt. So I'm going to go ahead and pull those out real quick. So here's our crankshaft position sensor. I got the 2 bolts out. They're real easy to take out. Once they were broke free, I just turned them out. They were like so loose I take them out by fingers. I had to add this extension though because there wasn't enough room for the head of my ratchet to fit in there, so just figured I'd tell you before you crawl under there and figure out you need an extension. And then once the bolts were out, it just lifts right out, and this is dirty looking on the inside as it is on the outside. So I really was thinking, oh, I better keep this thing clean, but it doesn't look like I really need to. So there's that, it's out. So I ran into my second surprise of this adventure. The bolts that are under here, they don't even hold it to anything. It's just these 4 right here that you'll have to take out. It still needs to come off though because it'll be in the way of the jack getting under the transfer case when we pull it. So I'm going to take it off, and instead of putting the bolts back into the transmission so I don't lose them, I'm just going to lay them in place in this plate off to the side so they don't get lost, because I don't want them sticking out from the bottom of the transmission and being in the way of the jack. Alright, next one I'm taking out is this 9/16 size nut that's holding the linkage to the transfer case. So I'm going to go pull that out, and then so that thing was really stuck on there. I couldn't pull it off, but I got this little pry bar and it really just moved it instantly once I started using it. So let's see if we can get it off. Alright, decided my next step was to hook the transmission jack that I bought to the transfer case. This thing costs about 90 bucks at Harbor Freight, including tax, and I'm still going to pay way less than I would if I paid somebody else to fix it, and I have it on hand now. I don't know if you can see, but on this jack I bought, this little ear coming down from the transfer case fit right in there, and then another one fit right down on the side of this bolt. So I figure that's where it's going to be most secure at. and that's where I strapped it down at. One of the things I was very careful of is when I ran the strap over the top, I made sure that it went under all these disconnected wires, so none of them are actually strapped down to it. It's all underneath them. Especially the O2 sensor one over there. That one's right by where the strap is. And then if you look here, where you undo the wing nut to make the jack the same level as the transmission or transfer case, I have it raised completely up. So that goes to say that if I didn't do what Water Dog said and have the back higher than the front of the Jeep, it would be really hard to match that angle because it would be like that. So I highly recommend making the back higher than the front. Like he said, I probably about 3 inches higher in the back. I might do 4, maybe even more than that, but 4 for sure higher than the front. And I'm gonna get to taking out the bolts that connect it to the transmission. I'll let you know what size they are after I find out. Alright, so the bolts holding the transfer case to the transmission, which also hold this last bracket that holds the transfer case's shift linkage, are 9/16. So I'm going to get my 9/16 socket on here and try to get this guy off. This one was hard to get to behind the bracket. I ended up getting the socket on it. At first I thought I had to use a wrench, and then I found out once I moved it so far, because of the hole opening, I couldn't even get it back on it again and advance it any further off. So then I found a way to finagle the socket into there. I had to move the breather tube out of the way that was holding me up, and then got it in through the top, and there's barely enough room for the length of it to make its way under the floorboard up there, but it does fit. Alright, this nut's a pain in the butt. So I got the socket on it right here, and it's advancing out. It advanced out far enough that I could lift the bracket off of here and pivot it upwards so I can see inside there. But as you can see, my ratchet is backed out all the way against the transmission. So I'm gonna have to tighten it back in, but at least now I got this moved out of the way, and I can go back in either with a wrench or my hand and take it out by hand, since all of them have been real loose, and it's backing out really loose now. Just can't go any further. So I'm gonna tighten it back down, pull the socket off of it, and then go at it with my hand or a wrench now that I got this bracket out of the way, and I can have some access to move a wrench back and forth and fit my hand in there. Alright, so I got the transfer case disconnected. Got one surprise, I got some fluid leaking. I didn't think that was supposed to happen, but it is, so we'll deal with it and figure out why, if I gotta buy more fluid and put it in. I didn't think they were connected, so anyway, it's leaking fluid. But I found out something that really helped me. As I was raising and lowering it, trying to back it up, it was sticking a lot, and then I realized there was a smaller gap at the top than at the bottom, and I raised it and lowered it until the gap was the same distance at the top and bottom of the transfer case and the transmission. Once that gap was the same, it backed up really easy. So obviously it was binding because the transfer case was too high or too low to pull out. So once you get that gap even, it pulls out really easily. So hopefully it just pulls on right out and doesn't leak stuff everywhere. It's already got the biggest gap it can though to leak out, so it should be done leaking whatever it's going to leak. So I figured out a couple things that helped me when I was pulling this. This side was on the exhaust side. This bolt here was kind of hard to get to, but you could fit. This wrench here was too long, but my shorter one fit in there and worked well. This one, I used my socket on it, and the exhaust was so close that I could only move it like this much, and once the nut got so loose that it didn't want to ratchet anymore, it just wanted to turn it back on every time you tried to get it to ratchet, it wouldn't work. I ended up sticking this wrench underneath, putting pressure against the socket, and it allowed me to get the ratcheting action back even though my fingers wouldn't fit up there. I got quite a bit of reach like that. Another thing I figured out while I was over there, there was a real tight one that I couldn't break loose. I took one of my deep well sockets that just fit over the handle of my wrench, and it gave me just the extra leverage that I needed to pull it off. It worked really well. So it's a couple things that I figured out and thought I'd share with you. Also, I just noticed it looks like my fluid I had leaking maybe came out where this bearing seal is and piled up in here, but never made its way out because it was sealed up against the transmission. So, yeah, I'm not that worried about it. Looks good to me. I mean, that's a small amount for how long it's been since I changed it last. And then again, this has never been taken apart, so that's 130,000 miles worth right there. Because I'm pretty sure when the STEALERSHIP did it, they didn't take this apart. It didn't look like it was touched. I think they took everything off all at once. So that's no biggie. Just a little mess to clean up on the floor. Alright, so I lifted the back of the transmission up with the transmission jack so that I could lower my floor jack down and move it over as far as I can on the front of the transmission. Then I raised it back up. Now lower this down, move it forward. Hopefully my floor jack isn't too wide that I can't get the thing forward far enough, even though the factory service manual says that all you need is to support the engine. I really like the idea of having that extra protection against crushing the pan. So hopefully I can get it up far enough. Alright, so my floor jack is too big of a floor jack. It's too wide to do what the guys were recommending and use an extra jack under there. So I lowered it down on the oil pan and all is well, even with the weight of the transmission. However, my transfer case is gone now. That's probably like 50 or 60 pounds, I guess. It didn't feel that dang heavy, but it's got a lot of leverage since it was at the very end. So I would still recommend doing what the other guys on the forum recommended, adding another jack under there to help protect your oil pan. If I had a narrower floor jack, I would definitely have kept it under there the whole time. It was just impossible for me to get this into position because I think this should go right about here, because a lot of this is dead airspace, so I would keep it more in this area. You see where the drain plug is, and then the center is right about there, kind of where the seam is. I think that looks pretty balanced to me. And I couldn't get it there with my floor jack, but my transfer case is, you know, taking a lot of the weight off the end of it, so that's good. So I just thought I'd let you guys know where I'm at. I'm gonna jack this up, strap it down. Probably. Alright, so I'm gonna remove the shifter next, and it's kind of weird. The factory service manual says there's a round retaining ring in here that you push down on and turn counterclockwise. And it also, in the picture, it's kind of hard to tell, but we're looking at like a pretty flat side here and a pretty flat side here. Mine's almost rectangular shaped, and I see nothing round in there. And I pointed my camera in there and looked, and everything seems to be one solid piece of metal, nothing to push down and turn. So if yours is round, the way you remove it is you lift this rubber piece up and then push down and turn counterclockwise on a round thing and then lift the shift mechanism out. But mine doesn't appear to be like that. If I find out otherwise after I get it out, I'll let you know. But the only thing I could find similar, B&M sells a replacement shifter, and they showed how to take it out. It said remove 4 8mm bolts, and mine has 4 8mm bolts, so I'm going to remove those and try to lift this whole thing out of there. And it's also in third gear right now. And the FSM, it says to have it in first and third gear, and the same thing with the B&M product. that said to take out the 4 bolts, said to have it in first or third. So see if we can get this out. It came right out with removal of the 4 bolts, and it's got a rubber seal on the bottom, and it's very clean, and it has oil all over it. So I put a plastic grocery bag on it to keep all this dirt that's on the transmission out of the very clean shifting mechanism in there. So once I get the transmission out though, I'm gonna pull that bag off and look at it, because it'll come down further now, and see if it has anything resembling that round lock piece that the FSM spoke of. I used that deep well socket trick again I told you about earlier. I slid it over the handle and I broke my bolt free with it, making my handle that much longer. Worked really well. I found something helpful with an extension on the, let's see if I can get this light on. With an extension on that 15mm socket right there, you can move your ratchet handle out here where it's easy to get to, instead of trying to work with it up in here. You can also reach around in here, but I highly recommend using the extension and bringing it down here. It's a lot easier. So as cool as my little socket trick on the end of the handle was, some of these bolts are way too tight. I think the guy at the STEALERSHIP put them on with a impact wrench or something and just over torqued the hell out of them. So I went to the hardware store, bought this piece of pipe to use as a cheater bar, and it's working great. The bolt I was stuck on came out as soon as I tried it. So I don't know why I haven't bought one of these with how often I work on cars, but it sure makes life easier. Could bust your ratchet though. So the starter's out. It was just 2 bolts. And on the back of the gear casing on it, there's it's just metal, and it's, I guess, magnetic because of the motor. And there's this broken metal shard stuck to it, so maybe we're getting close to finding out what's going on with my clutch, unless the STEALERSHIP left broken metal stuff in there. And that's the starter. Put the 1 bolt back in. Alright, the bolt that was right there was 17mm. I just took it out. These here are 18mm, and this exhaust pipe here is too close to it to get to with my ratchet, so I'm just going to get a wrench to take these out. So I didn't have an 18mm wrench. Biggest one I had was 17, so I'm using an adjustable wrench on this side and my 18mm socket on this side, and he had it really tight, so I'm using my bar again. So I just noticed this. See how there's a gap here anyway, so it's not like it matters that much, but look where the STEALERSHIP pried right there. Pried it and bent it up, so I guess that may be something that is common practice, to wedge stuff in there and bend objects at the STEALERSHIP. So we'll see if we can get it off without bending up any more stuff. So this one was too close to the oil pan for a 13mm socket, so I have to use a 13mm wrench. And you can see where my ratchet's sticking on one. That's a 13mm bolt as well. Alright, there's another 13mm bolt. Here's a catalytic converter. We're on this side. It's up high above where the starter was, and you see that little electrical connector behind it. It's so close I can't get a socket on it, and I just don't want to mess with it, so I'm going to try to get it with a wrench. And if you look, here's the body mount, here's a tire up behind the frame right here. You can get your hand in that way, and there's actually quite a bit of room in there. It don't look like it, but there is. Alright, right back there where that breather hose is hooked is where that exterior Torx bolt is. It's an E12, just like Water Dog on the forum told me, so if you just want to buy one socket, you'll need an E12. And he also told me there's two of them, and he said they're on top. I feel a hole up there, so I think the STEALERSHIP left one of mine out when they did this work, so I think I only have one, but we'll find out soon enough. Alright, so based on what Water Dog from the Wrangler forum told me, who's been really helpful, I feel like I should buy him a beer or something. Where the big bolts were and where the starter was, I put a putty knife in here like this. It's got metal on the back too, so I used a rubber mallet, hammered up in there, and then there was enough room. After that, he said you could try to get a screwdriver in there and pry it. I happen to have these little bitty pry bars, so I used that. I hammered that in on the back with the rubber mallet too, and now the transmission is definitely backing up. You can see the, I don't know if you can't see it, you can see the gap there. When I pull, it opens up some. And he also said that you could take a pry bar and pry here. I haven't tried it yet, but I'll let you know if I end up doing it. Between the oil pan and the bottom of the bell housing here, I would do it right there where there's not just thin metal up higher. And you can pry between the oil pan and the bell housing here on the transmission to push it back. So I got it supported on my stand, and I'm gonna try to slide it on back out of here slowly but surely. Alright, and keeping true to showing you guys every little mistake I make, I forgot this bolt up here. You see my pry bar there. I came over to the other side by the starter to get ready to pry this side, and I noticed right above where I was prying there was a bolt. So I just checked it, it's 5/8, and I'm going to remove it with my ratchet and finish prying this side out. So just to show you I don't know everything for dang sure. We're going to make this happen. Alright, so right next to that big bolt I just removed, that's hard to see. Okay, there's where the starter bolt was, right below that wire, right above it, right here. Right there, right behind that is the place you should pry at. It's real solid behind there. Forgot what he called it, like guide tubes or something like that, is right behind those two big bolts. So that one and the one on the other side is where you should pry at, right behind there. I did that, and it's starting to slide back, so I'm gonna get my tools out of the way and try to roll it out in a second. Alright, so after moving that other side back some, now you can see there's a gap in here, and it's hard to hold this camera, but now look how big the gap is. So I'm gonna go, if I have to, work my way from each side to this side to this side to that side until I get it backed up, and eventually I may go to here, between the oil pan and the bell housing, like Water Dog said. Pretty much everything I'm doing is what he told me, and I just had a piece of wood laying around, so I already tried pushing on a little bit with that, but yeah, it looks like that it moved some. So yeah, it's backing up. Alright, I see the flywheel in there, and anyway, let's set the camera down for a second and work at it, but I just wanted to give you a gist of what I was doing. Alright, so about 30 seconds after I stopped recording the last time, I just pushed the jack with my hand and it just went back. So I am going to go ahead and try to roll it back, and I just want to record that in case anything falls, you know. That would suck, but be good video. Move my transfer case linkage out of the way. See if I can come down with it yet. All right, yeah. So let me get this light on. I'll grab this. All right, so there you can see the shaft just cleared the clutch there, so I can go ahead and lower the transmission down some, because right now it's backed up all the way against my transfer case linkage that's still hanging from the side up here. So once I lower it down, it'll be able to clear that and roll on out from under the Jeep. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. All right, let's see what my problem is. The bottom's broke off my release bearing. It's probably where that metal came from that was stuck to my starter earlier. I'm having problems too. The Jeep is not jacked up high enough to roll this out from how low my transmission jack will go. So instead of trying to jack the back up higher, since the engine's already supported by the wood, and if I start jacking it up, it's just going to allow it to start hanging down. It'll probably need a couple inches. I could do it. I'm just going to try to take the easy way out though and pivot the weight of this forward to lower it down and roll it out. And I figured I'd videotape it in case something stupid happens. Get off the creeper. Sweet, I don't look like a dummy on video. Right there, it's broke off. And basically my symptom was my clutch wouldn't disengage. I actually started it and the starter pulled it and started while we were rolling. And then I found that if I pushed the pedal as far to the floor as it would go, it would disengage. So I hurried up, drove home. Now this is where we're at. I ordered a new clutch that comes with the bearing and everything. It's in the mail. It's supposed to be here tomorrow, so I can't really do too much else until then, but I will. I thought this spring right here that holds the pivot fork in place, I thought that came off and was causing my problems, but obviously not. Yeah, so finish rolling this out of here and start taking the stuff off of it. All right, I got a new release spring, which is this thing right here. It doesn't really release anything. It just holds this fork onto the ball. So I'm not too careful with it since I'm replacing it anyway. They're $5 at the dealership. It looks like that. A lot of people said you should replace them, and it's cheap insurance, so I would definitely replace it. And then we'll just slide this on off. And there you can see my problem. You might be changing your clutch for who knows what, but that was my issue. My shaft here Doesn't look scored, grooved, or anything like that, which is good. Looks to be in real good shape. I'll clean that up real nice. And let's see, yeah, it's in the video. This ball here, it's got a like nylon or something on top of it. And when I went to go buy my spring at the dealer, they asked if I'd like to buy that ball too. It was $10, and I figured, hey, why not? It's a lot of work to get this apart. Why not put a $10 new part in it? So I have a new one of these as well I'm gonna put in there. It is held in place with a single nut that is right there directly behind it. So that's that. Clean it up real good, get it ready. My new parts aren't here yet. They should be here tomorrow. So kind of running out of stuff to do, but oh well. Alright, so if you remember earlier, I was a little confused because all the stuff I read said you push down on a ring to get the shifter out and turn it counterclockwise. Mine didn't have that ring. I just went under the Jeep now that the transmission's out of the way and looked, and it definitely doesn't have that ring. There were 4 little Torx bolts on top of it, little Torx screws I would say, that may have also removed it, but you would have had to go in from the top to get to those, and I don't even know if that would be the proper way to do it, but this way that I read on the B&M website ended up working really well. But the reason that seal was there is this goes straight down into the transmission, and as you can see, obviously from off-roading and everything, it's dirty as heck. So I'm gonna try to clean out any little thing I can see with some Q-tips, and then I'm gonna stuff a rag in here, and I'll leave that in place until I move the transmission back in to keep anything else from falling in there when we go to put it back. Alright, so now I'm gonna start taking all these 1/2-inch bolts off that go around the clutch here. So I was having a hard time with one of these bolts. It's the 1/2-inch bolts that are holding the clutch on, but I kept smacking the wrench handle and all the rest of them were coming off, but this one, I don't have an impact wrench, which clearly the STEALERSHIP that put this on here 5 months ago. As you can see, it's pretty new looking, but I ordered a new clutch anyway. You know, if you're gonna do all this work, you might as well replace it. So anyway, I hit the handle on my ratchet with this rubber mallet, and it kind of gave it a little impact wrench feel, and it came loose really easy. I've never done it before, but just figured I'd share it because it made it a lot easier. And also, you're supposed to sand this flywheel with the emery cloth. The STEALERSHIP had me pay to have it machined, and it does actually look like they did. I can see the little grooves from it. So that was just done about 5 months ago, so I shouldn't really need to sand much at all with the emery cloth, but I'll probably get some and do it anyway. It still looks really freshly machined. I'll have to see under the plate though, but got a couple more bolts and we'll see what that looks like. Alright, so 6 1/2-inch bolts and clutch is off. You can see the machine marks on here. Looks like they really did do it, and it's pretty well untouched looking. So I'm gonna probably just get some brake cleaner, make sure there's no grease whatsoever on there, spray some brake cleaner on there and leave it at that. But the factory service manual says you should scrub this with emery cloth, sand it down. Obviously after you do that, make sure it's real clean, and you want no grease on this or oil or anything, not even fingerprints so much when you go to put it back together. So you want that flywheel here to be really, really clean. So I figured I'd tell you real quick why I was so adamant about taping these U-joints on. This is my front drive shaft. When the STEALERSHIP put this clutch in 5 months ago, my rear drive shaft days later started vibrating extremely bad. I pulled over, my son was in the back seat in the car seat, pulled over, the bolts that hold the retaining clips on there almost had worked their way all the way out. I took them out, the cap fell off the U-joint and the needle bearings were missing. So when the mechanic removed my rear drive shaft at the STEALERSHIP, which in this case is Youngblood Chrysler Jeep Kia in Springfield, Missouri, we lost the needle bearings and just put it right back on and bolted it back to my Jeep. My son could have got hurt. Well, I took the drive shaft off, threw it in four-wheel drive, and drove to the Jeep dealership, gave it to them. I was livid. They put a new U-joint in it for free. You know, how nice of them. And I want to put my drive shaft back on myself because I don't trust them to do anything. Well, we've been having some winter weather here recently. It's the first time I was really using four-wheel drive. It's cold. I haven't been going off-roading or anything. And my front drive shaft started to vibrate a little bit. I go under there and the bolts were a little bit loose. I tightened them back up and everything seemed okay. But I was just thinking about it. I decided to take a look and look at the sideways play in this bearing. Look at this one. No sideways play. I pull it off, and it's probably going to be hard to see on this video. Let me go outside. And there you can see a couple remnants of 2 or 3 needle bearings and some grease. All the rest of them are gone. So if stuff like this isn't enough reason to do the work on your own, I mean, I paid like $200 to include my transmission jack for parts, you know, and I'm not going to have to worry about my drive shaft going through the floor. So, you know, save yourself some money and have confidence in yourself and do this yourself, man, because you pay a dealership. I had to do it because I was moving and I didn't have my tools and I was living in an extended stay motel. Otherwise, I would have did it myself. But man, do the work yourself, save some money, and you'll know it's done right. These are supposed to be professionals, and look what they did. And here I am 5 months later doing it again anyway. But you live and you learn, and then hopefully you can teach other people. Alright, there's the little pilot bearing, the center of the flywheel there. And here's the puller. Stick it in there, screw in the middle, and it expands to grab behind it. This might be a two-hand job. Yeah. Alright, the puller's in there. Look at the size of this slide hammer O'Reilly loaned me. So it's a bit large. I shouldn't have any problems, but I go ahead and thread that into there and then slide it back against that and pull out the bearing. Alright, it's something that's new to me. I've never done it, so I want to get it on video. I think I got the camera in the right spot. But let's just try to pull this out. My shifter's in the way. This huge slide hammer. It's coming out. And there's our pilot bearing. Boy, that would have been impossible without this nice free tool they loaned me. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do, now that I got the pilot bearing out, because I am going to put just an ever slight amount of grease in there with it. Remember, you don't want excess grease because you don't want any coming out and getting on your flywheel and just ruining your whole clutch job. But before I do that, I'm going to take brake cleaner and clean this flywheel off really good. This is at the point where you would take emery cloth according to the factory service manual and like sand it down, scuff it up just lightly with the emery cloth. The STEALERSHIP charged me and machined my flywheel, which isn't even recommended in the factory service manual, and from all the knowledge I got from everybody else on the Wrangler forum, it shouldn't even be done, but you can still see the marks from where they machined it. So obviously I'm not going to buy emery cloth and sand it down anymore, since they just did this job 5 months ago. And yeah, it's pretty clear. You can see the marks go from the contact area all the way to where it doesn't even touch. So I'm just going to clean it up with some brake cleaner. And I've also been cleaning the inside of the bell housing with brake cleaner as well, even though you don't really need to. You can put it back in dirty if you want, but I've been cleaning it with brake cleaner, and what I did, since I was spraying it everywhere and it was dripping, I put a plastic bag and rubber banded it around the shaft so that it doesn't run inside there and get inside the transmission with all the dirt and grime and brake cleaner. So I'm also going to replace that little ball with my new one. Here's a close-up of how the pilot bearing puller works. Thought it was pretty cool. It goes in there, spreads the jaws out, reaches behind it, and uses a giant slide hammer to pull it out. Pretty neat tool. Alright, new balls in, once again. 9/16 socket, 3/4 inch wrench, and I put some blue Loctite on. Whoa. Alright, next thing I'm going to put in is our new pilot bearing. I'm going to lightly lubricate it with some grease. Wheel bearing grease I got from Walmart. And then you install it. It says put it in by hand. This is the factory service manual. I have it on digits. You can download it for free. There's directions how on Wrangler forum. Take the pilot bearing. It says insert it by hand, and then use this alignment tool, which came with my clutch. So I'm going to lightly lubricate this with grease, very, very lightly. I'll probably wipe some off when I'm done. And then I'm going to go put it in by hand and put it in with my little tool. Alright, let's see how much of this I can do with one hand. So here's my pilot bearing. Place it by hand. My tool. Alright, try to record this. So, I figured I had to use that slide hammer to get the other one out. So, I got the alignment tool in there, and I got a rubber mallet. I'm recording it because I do not plan on banging this real hard, and I don't want you guys to think when I say I used a mallet that I just hammered it on home. I just plan on trying to lightly tap it into place, seeing how it works out. It's slowly going in. These wires are in my way. Uh-oh. A little thing on the back's bending and breaking on my tool. About halfway in. So I finished breaking my thing for it. It's probably not made to be hammered. I'm almost in all the way. when I reviewed the video and got my new pilot bearing in, pretty much goes about flush with the flywheel. So that's in. Cool, you can see all the way in the back of it. But it's lightly greased and in place. I managed not to touch anything. I got grease on my fingers right now, so I didn't touch the flywheel. It's still clean from the brake cleaner. If you get anything on it, any grease when you're messing with that bearing, be sure you clean the grease off this flywheel. And brake cleaner is great for that. So my flywheel is still clean. The next thing I'm going to do is get my clutch and put that on. Alright, got my new clutch disc. It's sitting on my alignment tool that it came with, and man, it's kind of hard to see, but right there it says flywheel side. The factory service manual says to put flywheel side towards flywheel side. It says if it's not marked, put the flat side towards the flywheel. You can see how this side is pretty flat, whereas that side's raised up. So this raised up side would go to the transmission, flat side to the flywheel, and it is marked. It's just, I didn't even see it at first. I looked at my old one, seen it on there, and then I found this one at the last minute. It's so faint and the paint almost covers it. So we're gonna go slide this into place. All right, the next thing I'm gonna do is put the cover on the clutch. It's sitting there with the alignment tool holding in the pilot bearing right now. But there's something that I thought was really important that clearly the STEALERSHIP didn't follow, because my stuff was way tight. I used a breaker bar to get the bolts off. But it says tighten the cover bolts evenly and in rotation a few threads at a time. Cover bolts must be tightened evenly into a specified torque to avoid distorting the cover. Tightening torques are 23 foot-pounds on 2.5 liter engines, which I don't have. 38 foot-pounds on my 4.0. Start all 6 bolts by hand. Tighten 3 pilot hole bolts 3/4 of the way in any sequence. So put 3 bolts 3/4 of the way in. Then, starting 180 degrees from the last pilot bolt, tighten 3 large hole bolts 3/4 of the way, any sequence. Then tighten the 3 pilot hole bolts all the way, any sequence. Starting 180 degrees from the last pilot bolt, tighten 3 large bolts all the way, any sequence. Apply a light coat of Mopar high temperature grease, bearing grease to the clutch disc hub and splines of the transmission input shaft. Do not over lubricate shaft splines. This will result in grease contaminating the disc. Install transmission. This is in bold. Do not over lubricate. So remember that. I'm going to get ready to put this in, and the bolts are all the same size that go into it, but if you look, it looks like this bolt hole is a little smaller than this bolt hole, like it's bigger, so there'd be more play in the bolt. So I'm guessing when they say large bolt, they're talking about this bigger hole, even though the bolt's the same size. When they say pilot bolt, they're talking about the ones that go in the little hole. Unless my eyes are playing tricks on me, but that's the way I'm reading it. That's what I'm going to do. Another thing, I haven't read anywhere, but it scares me, is this is steel and it isn't rusty. So I'm guessing there's some kind of oil on it. So I'm going to clean this really good with some brake cleaner and make sure there's no oil on it. And I even think I can see it now, but I'm going to make sure there's no oil residue on my clutch cover or whatever this thing's called. Yeah, I think cleaning this thing's important, so I actually want to video it so it doesn't just get bypassed and left out maybe by someone. So, a little brake cleaner. And now I'm just gonna spray it again, let it dry on its own. Brake cleaner is pretty awesome, so. All right, so while I'm waiting for this to dry, the brake cleaner, I decided to test my little theory about the pilot hole versus a large hole. This is one of my 6 bolts that go on it. That you can see nice rounded edges from the STEALERSHIP. Probably using a frickin' impact wrench on it. But this one, it just fits in there perfectly. It barely moves side to side. It's tight, so I think that's the pilot hole. This one, there's a lot of side to side play in it. So I think that's the large bolt that they were talking about, because all these are the same size. But I'm gonna assume these are my 3 pilot holes. So let's double check that. So large, pilot, large, yeah. All right, cool. All right, I'm getting ready to bring my clutch cover under there to put it on. Brake fluids or brake cleaner's dry now. I'm gonna bring my ratchet, my 1/2" socket with 6 bolts to go to it, and my torque wrench and Loctite. And I need to torque them to 38 foot-pounds. Alright, got the 3 pilot bolts in the small holes in, and they're just finger tight. And I don't want to put Loctite on them and start moving this around and position it and get Loctite on my flywheel. So I'm just going to pull each one out one at a time and put a little drop of Loctite on it and put it back. It doesn't even say you have to use Loctite. I'm just doing it for the heck of it and to make myself feel better. So if you don't want to, by all means don't. But that's just a way I'm going about it to make sure I don't get on the flywheel. Alright, I got all my bolts in, just finger tight. Man, these wires are making it hard to video. Alright, so this one here is one of the pilot bolts. So that makes this one over here one as well, and this one up here, and then a reverse triangle the other ones. So I'm just going to go and tighten the pilot bolts first. They're already finger tight until they're just snug. I got my torque wrench down here too, so I'm not going to put any torque on them yet. Alright, that one's snug. I'm going to go up to this other pilot bolt. Tighten that one. Alright, that one's snug. Tighten this one. Remember, the pilot bolts were the ones that went in the smaller holes. Alright, that one's snug. Now I'm going to go do the big bolt holes that the FSM calls big bolts. That one's snug. Alright, I'm going to tighten it to 38 foot-pounds. It's going to be hard to do well, not hard to do, but hard to do with a camera on my chest trying to keep it from falling over. Just to show you how this torque wrench works. So it's a cheap kind. You don't just turn the handle, to what you want and it clicks when you get there. You gotta push it until the lever gets to where you want it on the gauge. And it's hard enough that the flywheel is going to want to turn. So you got to hold that with one hand, torque wrench with the other, and turn it until you get to 38 foot-pounds. Which I have to go to a different position. Because it goes too far. I didn't make it to 38 because the camera's gonna fall, but I'm gonna do this pilot, the next pilot one up there, pilot one over there. Then I'm going to do the large hole ones. So I'll go from that pilot one to a large hole one and crisscross to the other large hole ones. That should be that. Alright, so this thing shouldn't be that hard to pull out. The little plastic ring that it came with was designed to pull it out, but I hammered on it, broke it off. And yeah, it pulls out pretty easily. Pretty easily. Alright. Gonna very lightly grease where the bearing carrier contacts the release fork. Just dabbing on it, smearing it very thin. And I'm pretty much putting it where the paint has worn off, because you can tell that's where it makes contact at. And then we'll go see how the paint's got that shiny right there. Put some in there. Same with the other side. And then on our throwout bearing, we're going to cover the inside of this with a very light coat. Pretty much everything in the FSM says to keep this very light. You don't want to have any excess grease flying around in there that could get on your flywheel or clutch. So you don't want no gobs hanging anywhere. Just putting a light film. Let's see. And this is installed. The slots in the photographs are on the right hand side as you're looking at it. So we're going to take these spring clips, slide them into the slots they go into. Get a little screwdriver. Ooh, better yet. Let's get some needle nose pliers and do this from behind. If you can see that. Yeah, that worked way easy. Just lift it up with some needle nose pliers and snap it on. So this little tube of stuff that came with the luck clutch is called a spine lubricant, so I'm gonna stick it on the spline. It's pretty thick too. I thought it'd be runny since it was in a tube. but it's nice and thick. If I didn't have this, if I bought a different brand clutch, I would just use the grease I was using earlier. Don't buy an AutoZone clutch. That's what was in here. They had that bearing that just had the ear snap off. So I don't recommend them. There ain't much of this stuff in here at all. Well, you're supposed to use it sparingly anyway. Alright, next thing we're going to do is slide our fork back on. In the photo in the FSM, the slot here is on the right hand side. I don't know if it matters, but I'm definitely putting it back exactly how it pictures it. So it goes on the right hand side as far as I'm concerned. And just slide it on. And then this is called a return spring, but it pretty much clips over it and holds it in place on this ball right here. I pushed the back end in first. I was trying to do it front end first, and it was really hard. The second I tried to put the back end first, it went on there really smoothly. I was seeing how hard it is to pull off. All right, back end. I bent it when I pulled it off. Just bent it back. It was bent just slightly. Alright, it's on there again. So when our slave cylinder pushes this in and out, that'll push on our clutch. I'm working this back and forth, making sure I don't end up with a glob of grease coming out this way, even though I put it on really lightly. So you see that little edge there? It'll probably never make its way into the clutch, but I don't want to give it a chance to, so any little globs on the edge here I see, I'm gonna take off. All right, there's that. All right, so we already seen just the light amount of grease we put on here. Can't even really see it, but we know it's there. So that's all put together and ready to go back. I took all my bolts out again that I showed you guys where they went. I bought a new one at the hardware store for the one the dealership stole because the other dealership didn't have one. Put a nice amount of grease on this. You can easily see that where it connects to the transfer case. And the transfer case, I went ahead while it's out and greased the part that the drive shaft is going to hook onto the back. And like I said, eventually I plan on getting a slip yoke eliminator and that's why I wanted to pull this out and learn how to do it. And when you do that, in case you're wondering, it removes this part of the transfer case. So it's pretty long, and it allows you to have a lot longer rear drive shaft. So I want to get one of those someday. But anyway, I'm gonna tilt the transmission back under the car. And all right, I slid the transfer case up to the transmission using the floor jack. Just put the floor jack behind it, raise it up to about the right height, set the case on top, and then my floor jack's got a metal wheel up front that slid sideways up to the transmission real easy. Now I put the 6 9/16 nuts back on, and I'm going to tighten them down, and then I'll roll it all under as one unit and put it back into place. That way I don't have to screw with the exhaust, put in that back on, which obviously when I go to put my slip yoke eliminator on someday and I don't pull the transmission, I'll have to take it or put it back on the exact same way I took it off. But just letting you know what I'm doing. Alright, I got it rolled under there. It didn't pop a wheelie when I took my jack out from under the transfer case, so that was good. Wasn't sure if that was going to happen. And it just took a minute to get it under there with all the wires that are hanging on the way and stuff. I had to lift the transfer case bracket that's hanging down right there. Had to make sure that was over it. I was pushing into that at first. And just all the little wires. And then I still got to raise it up, but right here, these are called like guide sleeves or guide bushings or something like that. So I'm guessing those are going to be important. You can see how they got a big hole right there for them. So I guess the first thing I should do is make sure there, that metal is lined up with that hole, because that's what's going to get us into place. Right there, there's one on each side. I got my little bag of bolts under here so I can put in something finger tight when I get it close. But I'm going to go ahead and jack it up to what I think is close to the height and then start recording again, because I think this is something that is just going to maybe be a little difficult. Lower it down. Let's show you what I did. All right, so that bag up there, that's what I wanted to check and see if it was binding. That's my my shifter that goes inside. It's still free and not binding. But when I looked up there, I seen this bracket here for the transfer case linkage, and I'm jacking that up, and it's like, should be nothing wrong with it. I'd noticed it soon enough not to bend it or anything, but that would suck if you bent your stuff. So now I gotta lower it back down some and get that back out of there. All right, so I was looking around the garage some. Yeah, and I like to fish, so I see these. And they're long metal rods. They're for holding fishing poles. I'm gonna see if those will work to help me line my transmission up. That'd be pretty damn awesome if they do. All right. There's a fishing rod holder. Going through the hole with the guide sleeve and into that hole. I'm gonna go stick one on the other side. I hope this works, man. It's a pain in the butt. There it goes. Whoa, it's going in. Thanks to the fishing rod holders. Wow. We ain't there yet, but we're almost. Jack might be. Alright, so I think I got the first bolt started. Right here. And it's a, what size is this? 5/8. It's one of the 5/8 ones that go on the guide bushing part. The way I did it, I was having a hell of a time, but I decided before I quit and went to the hardware store to buy a long bolt to stick through there to try to pull it together, to just lay next to the transmission, pretty much where I've been having the camera, so I couldn't, and I just kind of bear hugged it and was able to rock it into place and position it. I was able to see a lot better what I was doing from up that close, and having it close to me instead of being so far away from it trying to move it around while I videotaped was able to get me in there. So I'm gonna try to see if I can turn it a couple threads and then maybe try the other side. Alright, got the passenger side one tightened down. Let's try to get this one. So after all is a big bear hug laying next to it. They got, yeah, man, I do think that if I could have bought the long bolt to do that idea I had to stick a long skinny bolt through there and pull it together with a nut, I would have did it, because it went together, but it wasn't easy. That's going. Probably laugh at all the stuff I tried, like sticking the fishing rod holders, though. They actually did help me push the jack up, lined up with the engine. So that wasn't a bad idea. They weren't as wide as I would have liked them to be. Alright, that guy shouldn't be going anywhere. So there you have it. We're bolted back to the engine. Still got a lot more bolts to put back in though. Alright, next bolts I'm going to put back are the two 18mm ones that got nuts on them. One hand, look at that. So I'm gonna put those back and tighten them down. I'm gonna use a wrench on this side because now I don't have a wrench that big, so I'm using this adjustable one because this socket was in the way of the exhaust. I use my ratchet on this side. So I'll put one on each side in and move on to the next ones. Alright, threw the starter back in. Gotta tighten the bolt still. There's a 5/8 bolt right here. If you reach up around the frame, it's a lot easier to get to. And then back here is the 9/16. So I'm gonna go ahead and tighten those. Alright, next we're gonna put in the 3 1/2" or 13mm. I use 13mm, it fits better. The ratchet wouldn't fit in between here, I used a wrench. And there's one right there. And I'll show you the one on the other side. You can't actually see it. Whee! can't see it, but it is all the way. Let's see if I can focus on it. It's right behind that dent, and you need a wrench to get to it as well because of that electrical connector right behind it. And while I was over here putting that in, I snapped the O2 sensors plug back onto its little bracket that goes on that bolt there. So that's back in place, snapped on. And that's it for now. Alright, next I'm going to put in the two E12 external Torx bolts. Only mine are new because the STEALERSHIP stole one, so I just bought 1/2-inch bolts that fit there. And this is where your external number 12 size Torx bolts will go. One goes right here. The other one you can't see. It's in the same position but on the passenger side of the transmission. So I'll just reach over there to do it, but I won't be able to videotape it. And this is the what do you call it? Camshaft, crankshaft position sensor. That's not what I was looking for. I was looking for the vent hose. Here's one end of it. This vent hose for the transfer case gets bolted on with your external Torx number 12 bolt. On the side you can see on the driver's side. So I'm going to put the camera down and bolt this up. Alright, I don't have it in all the way yet, and I don't know if I'll be able to show you or not. This is that bolt that STEALERSHIP stole. I felt a bracket that holds the wiring harness that goes on it. There's the first one. There it is right there. So you'll obviously feel it when you remove yours, but since I didn't have to remove mine since they stole it, I just found it luckily by hand laying up there, and I'm getting it hooked back into place with the bolt. So just like you had your breather hose hooked to this one, you got a bracket that holds a wiring harness onto that one right there, and it's an external 12 Torx. I just bought 2 of the bolts since I had to replace it, so I got a hex bolt on there. Alright, next I'm going to put the camshaft position sensor back. I wiped it clean with some paper towels. I don't know what it's made out of, so I didn't use any chemicals on it. I just wiped it off with some paper towels. It lives in a dirty place anyway. And let's see, get the light on. Slide it back in its hole. There. It's held in place by 2 7/16 bolts. So I'm gonna put them back and it'll be in. Alright, so now our transmission jack strap's out of the way. The end of it's lightly greased. Slide it in to the fork. And of interesting note, somebody on the forum posted last night, make sure you don't push your clutch pedal with this out, or it'll end up flying out and you won't be able to put it back. So pushing this back in, and I'm gonna put the camera down, put the nuts in place, and slide its tube back in its holder there. Alright, now I'm gonna replace my shifter back into the transmission. Remember, my factory service manual said there would be a round shaped thing that you could push down and turn counterclockwise and lift it out. Well, I've run the forum, it's really hard to do that with those, and I don't have it anyway, so I didn't have to worry about it. But if you have one, I would assume you push it down and clockwise to put it back. Mine, I have 4 8mm bolts, so I'm going to take my bag off I had, keeping it clean, and I got paper towels stuffed in the top of the transmission to keep that clean. I'm going to pull all that stuff out and bolt it back into place with these 4 8mm bolts. So that bracket wouldn't go right in. It was obvious why, though. I had to raise the transmission jack, and now as I'm raising it, it's just starting to go into place on its own. See it? It's just slipping right into place. There it goes. Just raising the transmission up. So if it seems out of place, don't try to force it or anything. Just lift your jack up so that it'll go right into place on its own. Alright, this is a little out of order from the rest of the video. That's the transfer case bracket there. It's a 9/16 nut right here. This is the back of it, and it's coming towards me facing the front of the vehicle. This is two-wheel drive. I mounted it backwards when I did it. I had it like turned 180 degrees, and pretty much my Jeep was in 4 low when it was supposed to be in two-wheel drive, and the only thing I could put it in was 4 low. It just stood there. So this is the way it goes. It goes, if your lever up there is in two-wheel drive, the back of it should be here, and then it points towards the front of the vehicle. Alright, I'm about to start greasing my electrical connectors. I got this big tube because, I don't know, I slathered it on everything. But if you want, you can buy little packets of it that they sell for putting on like spark plugs and stuff at your auto parts store counter. Usually they're on the counter. But alright, the one I couldn't see where it went to, that's on top right here, he goes right there. Almost looks like it's metal instead of a connector. It's so dirty, everything's the same color. That's where he goes. So I'm gonna grease them up. Let's count them so we can make sure we get all of them. It's good to have a number, then we know if we missed one. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 electrical connections that we're gonna reattach. Also, this is back behind the transfer case still. You got this wire hanging down. There's where the front drive shaft hooks up. Don't forget to reconnect this little cable holder guy into this metal tab on top of the transfer case. Bam. Alright, so there's where we hooked up the speedometer. Here's that O2 sensor connector that goes all the way to here. It has a little mount for it on top of the transfer case right there. So slide it back into its mount. Alright, so I moved my floor jack under the transfer case. Then I lowered the transmission jack, turned it sideways so I have more room over here. And now it's supported by the transmission jack. I'm going to lower down the floor jack and move it over to the front of the transmission. And then once that's there, as you can see, my oil pan's not even on the wood anymore. I'll be able to hold the transmission up with the jack so I can put my skid plate back on when time comes. That way I don't have to worry about anything happening to my oil pan. Alright, and that's how I plan on finishing the installation jack-wise. Alright, I slid this guy back onto the exhaust hanger, and I'm going to pivot it up and bolt it back to the transmission with its 4 5/8 bolts right here. And I gotta just remember before I go to put the skid plate back on to take these nuts back off. But I'm gonna just pivot it up, bolt it back right now. Alright, about to slip the rear drive shaft on. Slides on real easy. Let's see where my paint is. So my paint is on that side and on that side that I marked. Take my tape off that I put on there so I don't lose my needle bearings like the STEALERSHIP likes to do. It's actually a pretty new U-joint because they put it on 5 months ago and they put my drive shaft back on without needle bearings and almost made it fly through the floorboard. So push it back. Put my holder on. Pull. Alright, I'm just going to leave that like that to hold it in place. I'm going to go get some Loctite, put Loctite on the other ones, put them in place, pull that one back out, and then Loctite it. Because I don't want it vibrating off like it almost did when the STEALERSHIP put it back without needle bearings. Alright, got the back drive shaft back on with Loctite and new zip tie on here. And they sell these stainless steel bands at Harbor Freight for $5 a bag if you want to use them instead of putting a zip tie on there. You can buy these. I seen them the other day. So I don't really want to use them, but if you want to, they sell them there. Next time I put the front drive shaft on, it's got all new U-joints in it that I put in a few minutes ago. Obviously you don't have to unless you're having problems with them or STEALERSHIP lost needle bearings out of one of them. Alright, same thing as the back side. I started one bolt. Started one bolt. I'm going to put the other 3 in with Loctite. And I'll take that one back out, put it back in with Loctite. I just like starting one to hold something in place instead of trying to do that with Loctite on it already and getting it everywhere. So you can see the green paint. We lined up the marks again the way we took it off. Like I said, I put all new U-joints in it. And the reason it's wet looking is there's a little rubber seal in the middle of this double cardan joint for the bearing that's in the center. And my little rubber seal was real dry and starting to crack. So I soaked it with silicone lubricant after I put it back together. It helps to moisturize rubber and keep it from drying out. So you don't need to take this apart and put new U-joints in. I just did it because I already bought them for the front, so I figured I'd do these too. But I think spraying that silicone spray on there on a regular basis, like maybe whenever you change your oil, would be a good idea to keep it from getting dry and cracking inside. And I I wish I didn't know it was in there until just now when I took it apart. So I'll definitely be spraying it whenever I change my oil. I wish I'd known about it 130,000 miles ago. So tighten those down, they're 8 millimeters. Got the little flexi thing on my ratchet, and I'll put the front on same way with Loctite. And it'll be time to put the skid plate back on. Alright, drive shaft back in. Get ready to go get the skid plate to put it on. There you see the front's hooked in. That's paint mark too, so service manual said put it back where the paint marks go, so I just did what they said. I don't think it matters, but they wrote it down, so why not do it? I have my bolts or my nuts stored on this. It's the rubber mount for the transmission, so be sure you take the nuts back off before you try to put the skid plate back on, or you'll just smash it up into the nuts. Alright, for mine, I have a TerraFlex lift that came with a lowering kit. The little cones go on the bottom, and these pieces. So it'll go this skid plate, then this with the cone facing down. I don't know what yours is, but mine have 3/4 inch bolts. So I got Loctite on them already, and I'm gonna put it back on. I figured since the skid plate is a big awkward piece, I'd show people how I do it. I don't really know how it's normally done, or if this might give you a good idea and make your life easier, so I'll just record how I do it. I lay on my creeper, I lay it on top of me, so my legs are way down there, there's my feet, and I roll under the car with it. And there's my bolt holes right there, and then I lift it up, and then I put in a couple bolts with one hand while I hold it up with the other hand, and then I go over to the other side and do the same thing while this side's still hanging real loose. And then be sure that those bolts go in the holes they're supposed to in the bottom here, right there, so you don't end up just smashing them into the bottom of it. And because this is still able, if I grab it and push, you know, I'll be able to move it around a little bit. It's just a jack holding it right now on the rubber engine mounts. If you didn't put this jack here like I did, it would be on your oil pan with your wood blocks, which I still left there for safety, but it's not sitting on them. So we'll get this guy on there. Alright, got the skid plate back on. Last thing we got to do is tighten down these 4 13mm nuts I just stuck back on. It lined right up with the transmission. Mine didn't get stuck at all, so hopefully yours goes as easy as that too. Alright, got those 4 13mm nuts tightened down, and I was just thinking, like, man, I can't wait to lower this thing down to the ground and take it for a test drive. And then I looked at this and I was thinking, how bad would it suck if you forgot your engine was supported by this and went and lowered it down while that's still there and you smash your oil pan after all that. So please remember to take this out. I'm going to do it right now before I get antsy and drop it down to the ground to go take a test drive. What do you want? You ain't going? So yeah, take your engine support out, and all you have left to do now is hook your negative terminal back up to your battery and get it down on the ground and go drive it around and have fun.